Good morning. It's good to see everyone this morning. Before we begin, Brother Ray, if you can say a prayer for us, please.
Heavenly Father, let our Lord today teach us through your word, help us grow, help us live what we learn. In Jesus' name,
Amen. All right. We're going to be in John chapter 21. John chapter 21, we're going to kind of have to scoot back a little bit here, understanding what's kind of going on. John chapter 21, and we'll look at the scene here, verses 1 through 14, kind of prepare us for a discussion here with Peter and Jesus. And as I said before, we are coming to a close already. We're just about done. We might just finish this morning, so we'll have an extra Sunday, which is perfectly fine. So again, we're in John chapter 21. John chapter 21. And again, this is, notice the scene here with Peter and the other disciples. Now remember, we went through a good amount of scenes already. Jesus died on the cross. Mary Magdalene and others came to anoint Jesus. Of course, he wasn't there. And of course, the angel said, why are you looking? And Jesus was there there with or called out to Mary, which Mary didn't know at first, but then realized that it was him, calling him Master. Then, of course, we have the other scenes as well. Jesus, Mary Magdalene goes, she tells the disciples, and of course, many of them did not believe or still did not believe. And we kind of took notice that, even with all of this, Mary Magdalene, the other ladies, and even the disciples as well, weren't quite believing in that Jesus was raised from the dead. They didn't quite believe in the resurrection at first, until they finally either saw Jesus. And of course, you remember Jesus appears among the disciples, and and one of the things that we kind of took notice too is that Jesus appearing in front of them, because again, when he was arrested, they ran, they scattered, they left, they forsook him or forsake him. And we would have thought that maybe Jesus would have said, how dare you forsake me? Why did you leave me? All of you guys are cowards, all that stuff. But what did he say? Peace be with you. Thank you, Ginger. Peace be with you. Isn't that awesome? He had every right to say those things, to be upset, to be mad, but instead he used the common Jewish thing in that time, of wishing comfort, wishing good in one's life, peace be with you. And not only did he say it once, but he said it twice, I just find that amazing. He didn't hold any grudges with them, even though, again, they left him. He went through the scourging, he went through the cross, all this stuff. He still forgave them. And it's pretty awesome. And you think about that with Jesus, again, showing us who God is. I mean, you think about us as well. When we sin, we fall short. As long as we repent of it, we continue. God is forgiving, as long as we repent. But I thought that was pretty awesome. One of my favorite scenes. But after that, of course, Thomas wasn't there. And, Thomas told them plainly, you know what, I don't believe none of this stuff until I put my hand through, his hands, until I touch his side and everything, then I will. Then, of course, Jesus appears in front of Thomas again. And not only did Jesus call out Thomas to, hey, come here and touch my hands, touch all this stuff, he knew already, Thomas had doubts already. But even with that, he still said, peace be with you. even with Thomas, even with the rest again. But Thomas did that. He touched him. He saw. He had that evidence, and he believed. And Jesus makes a statement, though. What statement does he make? Do you guys remember? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, blessed are those who have not seen, but those who have not seen, that's it's something that we definitely need, because we talked about that we do not need to see it firsthand with our own eyes. We just need to understand His Word. We have His Word. His Word is enough for us to believe in Him. But now in John chapter 21, noticing now the scene now with the disciples and with Peter, it seems some time has passed. Those with me verses 1 through 14. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and in this way he showed himself. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, and Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and the two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." And they said to him, "We are going with you also." They went out and immediately got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. But when the morning had now come, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to them, "Children, have you any food?" And they answered him, "No." And he said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some." So they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. Therefore, that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and plunged into the sea. But the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from the land, but about 200 cubits, dragging the net with fish. Then as soon as they had come to land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fish laid on it, and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish which you have just caught." Simon Peter went up and dragged the net to land full of large fish, 153. Although there were so many, the net was not broken. And Jesus said to them, "Come and eat breakfast." Yet none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus then came and took the bread and gave it to them, and likewise the fish. And this is now the third time Jesus showed himself to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. So noticing here that you have 7 of the 11 disciples, are fishing, and the night goes through, no one catches anything. And even before that, John makes it very clear that, it was Peter that was his idea to go out to go fishing. Of course, the rest of them decided to go with him. You can definitely understand that. Going with him, and for him not to be alone, of course. Remember again that this is the majority of them that this is their occupation, fishing, and they went back to work, and of course Peter went back to do that. They just saw Jesus. Again, who knows what's kind of going through their minds? But this is the third time that Jesus, appears in front of his disciples. The disciples didn't catch anything all throughout the night. And of course, I guess when the morning comes, or early in the morning, here's this man, which is Jesus. And he asked them a simple question, have you caught anything? And of course, they said, no, we haven't caught nothing. And tells them, well, throw your net on the right side. And immediately once they do that, it's filled with fish, And of course, we can imagine many of them are shocked, and John, the beloved, says that it is Jesus. And of course, who jumps in the water? Peter. Man, Peter. He jumps in the water to go see Jesus. And of course, the rest of them take the boat with the fish to the land. And there it seems Jesus is waiting. He has everything ready to cook the fish and everything to have breakfast with him. Now, during that time, though, John mentions as well that many of them didn't want to ask if it was Jesus there sitting there. I mean, we can imagine, like, in our minds like, is this a dream? I don't want to ask. Maybe this is not real. But of course, they're afraid to ask Jesus if it truly is him. But it is him. But in looking at all this, and which again we're gonna kind of talk about it just a little bit more. But I just find it so awesome because again we started at the very beginning of John, and there's this lifespan of Jesus. He was with them for about 3 years, and we're coming to a close already. And how did Jesus find the first of his disciples? What were they doing? They were fishing. This is the same exact thing or same exact way how Jesus came to them. And
That's what I was going to ask you. I know in verse 6 of 21, my Bible, the Beacon says it has reference to Luke 5.
That one's it.
So that's when he called them.
Mm-hmm.
He tells them to cast their nets on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a totally different time.
Yeah.
Because that's when he called them.
Uh-huh.
Just like his son Sarah, there you go.
Yeah.
They were not catching fish.
Mm-hmm.
Casting on the other side, they catch a multitude of fish.
Mm-hmm.
In teaching the little children, we taught this lesson many times, and I was like, is this the same?
Uh-huh.
It's
No, it's not.
totally different.
Yeah, totally different. And and I find that really awesome because it brings a lot more strength. It's kind of like one of those, I don't know, like you're watching a movie, and this couple or whoever, friends, find each other, at this certain place again, or this certain place for the first time, and then the very end of the movie, somehow they lose part of one another, and then they find themselves in the same place once again. And it's just there's a lot of I don't know. It's just it's excitement, but also sad at the same time, or joyfulness with that sadness in some ways, because again, they've all gone through a lot. Peter has done so much. The rest of them have done so much with Jesus. I mean, think about Peter here too. I mean, Peter denied Jesus 3 times, so we can imagine that's going on in his mind. And I mean, what can you do if you have something like that? When something's on your mind and kind of bugging you, what do you usually do? Go out and get busy, don't you? Maybe you just go into the workplace, get your mind off of things, maybe. And of course, they don't want to leave him alone, so they go with him as well. They do the same. So now, again, it's like it's coming full circle, in many ways here. And John understands that, when he's writing these things. And of course, it's just so awesome to see these things. And it's going to give a lot more emphasis, especially here as well, that, that Jesus is going to be talking to Peter in just a moment, which we're going to kind of examine that. But there are a lot of things that, to think about, again, remembering that when this happened the first time, that was recorded in Luke chapter 5. And that was there where Peter confessed his sinfulness. Jesus called his disciples to become fishers of men. We also remember John 20 recorded the commissioning of his disciples with the kingdom or authority to go into the world as these representatives of Jesus. But again, there's another overtone that John gives to kind of, again, to set this up for Peter and Jesus. So let's notice here. Here's the setting now that we see them both, and they're going to have all breakfast together, and they're going to be sitting with him. And we're going to notice here with Peter and with Jesus is going to be talking with Peter, and he's going to kind of, I guess in many ways, put him on the spot in some ways, kind of get him to maybe think. Because Peter is that one with brashness, right? He's always the first one kind of doing things. Noticing here, verses 15 through 17. John chapter 21, verse 15 through 17. So when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And he said to him, "Feed my lambs." And he said to him again a second time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, tend to my sheep. And he said to him the third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? And Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. So when they have finished, breakfast, eating with one another, fellowshipping, Jesus needs to speak to Peter. Noticing here that, Jesus calls Peter here, and he calls him Simon. And remember that Jesus called Simon, with a new name, Peter, which means rock. Rock. And Jesus here, he calls upon Peter by giving him, noticing again, remember that occasion. That's in John chapter 1, verse 42. But he calls Simon, son of John, or Jonah, do you love me more than these? Now, this is something that's pretty awesome, a question. And here in this moment, Jesus puts forth, do you love me more than these? Now, what Jesus might be asking Peter could be maybe three possibilities. One, it could be, does he love him more than the fish or his occupation? Or does Peter love Jesus more than the disciples? Or does Peter love Jesus more than disciples love Jesus? Now, most writers believe that Jesus is asking Peter if he loves Jesus more than the other disciples love Jesus. Now, thinking about that, it could be that, but I've always kind of remembered that, Jesus would always make it clear, loving him, it's not a competition, It never is, and it's not a competition with one another. It could be that, but I kind of believe that it's about the fishing, possibly his occupation, which was his occupation. That's where Jesus found him. He said in the very beginning that he would make them fishers of men. So considering that, or considering in the scriptures here, kind of presenting us in this chapter, disciples, again, remember, disciples are back in Galilee after Jesus has risen from the dead. Noticing verse 3, Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. Peter's not on a mission. He's not telling the world that Jesus has risen from the dead, because we did notice that they did believe. They saw that. And so Peter, it seems, has returned to his occupation in Galilee. Or at least he has returned to one of the joys of life, or of his life, which is fishing. So you think about this, you kind of think of the tone, or remembering this tone. Peter has extravagant, colossally or very big, that he has failed in many ways that he feels. Because again, he denied Jesus 3 times. And noticing here, perhaps maybe Peter feels that he's unqualified. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know what's going on in his mind. We can only speculate. Maybe he feels, thinking about the failure, what he did in the courtyard of the high priest in front of many individuals, again, denying Jesus. Thus, the denial scene, in many ways, it seems like it's a reset here in this situation with Peter. 3 times, Jesus asked Peter if he what? If he loves him. And I think about that, and I think about how strong that is. Does Peter love Jesus more than anything? Does he love him more than his occupation? Of course, the other 2 times Jesus asked Peter, he simply asked, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Now, before we kind of go any further, in this section here, it's a very popular section. Many preachers like dissecting it and going into it and talking about, agape and phileo, which is, again, different. He uses different of the Greek words here of love, in this context. Now, again, many have pointed out again that Jesus asked Peter the first 2 times if he loves him, and Jesus uses the word agape, but Peter responds with the word phileo. the word for love. Then, of course, the third time Jesus asks that Peter phileo, or loves him. And then Peter responds that, he phileo, that he loves him. Now, again, we kind of understand that in some ways, but I like to kind of again point out that the situation here with Peter and with Jesus, that Jesus asked him, 3 times in this text here, that if he loves him. Now, noticing here too, not only does he say that as well here, but Jesus also tells him the second and third time, what? Feed my sheep. And then again, he says the third time, feed my sheep. Now, you think about that, should we make a big deal out of the fact that Jesus changed maybe lambs to sheep? Now, some translation has in that way, but I don't think so. I don't think that's not necessary at all. But again, noticing what they are talking about here. 3 times, we know that 3 times Peter denies Jesus. And now 3 times Jesus asks Peter if he loves him. Now Peter feels, because notice in there, I believe it's the 3rd time, what's the emotion going on with Peter? What does it say? Well, he did say that, but it says that he was grieved, right? Yeah, he was grieved by it, that Jesus asked him a 3rd time with it. Notice in there, verse 17, Peter was grieved because he said it to him the 3rd time, do you love me? So again, Peter understands what Jesus is asking. Now, noticing here, as we kind of read this, Jesus does not ask Peter, are you going to fail me again? Jesus' question is simply, do you love him above all else? Do you truly love him? Now, of course, Peter, if you love me, then I think about, again, feed my sheep. He can't feed his sheep while he's what? Fishing. You can't do that. You got to choose one or the other. Either feed Jesus' sheep, which is what Jesus wants him to do, and he can't be fishing at the same time. Now, we know that Jesus, what he's trying to do, and Peter knows that Jesus, what he is doing. So again, listen to Peter after Jesus asked the 3rd time if he loves him, and he says again, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Now, again, that's a wonderful confession that what Peter gives, and Jesus asks, if Peter loves him, 3 times, and that's his response. But after the 3rd time, we can see that it strikes Peter, and he was grieved over this situation and what he said. But noticing here that all Peter can really say is that you know everything. You know already how I feel. You know already how, what I'm basically going to say. Peter does not point to his actions. He cannot point to his past actions, because we know that, what he did, and it's irrelevant. His past actions did condemn him. But the past doesn't matter right here. It matters going on forward. Jesus simply tells him, do you love me? Do you love me? And all Peter can say is, Jesus, you know me, and you know my heart. Now, it's pretty awesome in many ways, because again, he kind of shows the importance here that, feeding my sheep, you are to love me. Before we kind of go on any further, any thoughts so far? Mhm. Yeah, that's true. Mhm.
And these times, yes, I love you. I love you. Third time, Jesus asked me if you love me. That contrast with comparison.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think thinking about that, I just think it's pretty awesome because for the longest time I've always heard, again, he asked him 3 times, and that's always been in my mind, like, why would he ask him? And then until remembering that, he denied him 3 times, you just kind of see now here's your opportunity, do you love me? And of course, Jesus, with grace and forgiveness, he doesn't hold any grudges against him, but again, reassures him again, that he's there and he forgives him, and asking him, does he love him?
And Peter is faithful the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Tradition tells us that he was crucified upside down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From here, because going into Acts, that preaches the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So thankful for my cities
Yeah.
and put in prison. Just takes on that good study.
Mm-hmm. It many ways leads the rest, to keep moving forward. Because again, who speaks up in the day of Pentecost? Mentions Peter. It's just pretty cool to think about all that. One of the things that we see here is, the abundance of grace. You can't help to kind of see that what Jesus, does. It's absolutely, it's pretty awesome. And, Peter understands what, again, Jesus is doing. And, here, again, we can just think all the things that are going through Peter's mind and everything, maybe possibly thinking he's a failure and whatnot. But here we see him again, Peter, he's in Galilee, he's fishing. Jesus tells him, Peter, do you love me more than these? And of course, Peter, do you love me? Lord, you know that I love you. And of course, do not remain fishing, but feed my sheep. That's what I need you to do. That's what I want you to do. And of course, the 3 failures of Peter are met with, this opportunities of grace, but, we know that, he failed. But here again, that, do you love me? And he is to get back to, feeding his sheep. So again and again, we kind of see this, I guess you can say, this glorious, loving, merciful God, that we serve, that he extends that, that grace to us, as long as that we're truly, maybe we're in sin, that we're truly repentful, or that, again, that, what are our priorities in this life, and which is to do, God's will, to continue being faithful, to spread the gospel, to live in a way that brings glory to God. So you look at these situations, and easily it can be applied, for us today, and that's just a lesson within itself that you can take with that. Do we love Jesus more than anything in this life? And we are kind of in that situation many times, kind of like Peter, where we have a choice that we can deny Jesus or we can love Jesus, And that's something that's, we sometimes have to think about. But thinking about all this, again, it's very encouraging. Let me leave it with that. It's very encouraging because we see this with Jesus, and the same thing is with God as well, with us.
It's also interesting that, the imagery of sheep and, feeding the sheep and tending the sheep, is the imagery we get for elders. And then Peter, we find out later,
Mhm.
First Peter, he, says he is exhorting the elders of whom I am a fellow elder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that out. That was something else I want to bring up as well. Because again, he does become an elder later on. And here he is trying to instruct other elders, this is what you need to do. Someone told me a long time ago to feed sheep. You are to do the same thing. Feed sheep, protect them, help them, nourish them, excuse me. And so thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, that's another thing to think about as well. It's just really, really awesome. Oh man. If there's nothing else, let's continue here. So again, noticing these things, in many ways, Jesus has restored Peter, and he calls him to, feed his sheep, and, the rest of the apostles as well, to remain on that mission, of doing his will, feeding his sheep. And, even after denying the Lord 3 times, Jesus asked Peter 3 times if he loves him. Of course, Peter's grieved, but the Lord knows him, He knows Peter. He knows his heart. He knows that Peter tells him that you know me. So noticing here, starting in verse 18 through 19, we kind of continue the scene here, and it turns a little bit different here, or a little bit of a different message. But in verse 18 and 19, notice now what it says. Most assuredly I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wish. But when you're old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish. This he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, follow me. Right? Yeah. Yeah. So noticing here that, Daily Bible readers. Thank you. So after telling Peter, to feed his sheep, Jesus tells Peter, what's going to happen to him and his disciples. And right now, Peter has the freedom to go wherever he pleases or wherever he wants and, to dress himself. But that's not going to be the case in the future. Noticing he says again, when you're old, you will stretch out your hands and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. And I think we've all understand that analogy. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Yeah. No. I see the same thing because all these analogies. It's we can relate to. It's meant to kind of think about that. So noticing here, when Peter's older, he's going to exert power, or those others maybe exert power over him, and will bring about his death. Now, scholars note the phrase "stretch out your hands" was an idiom, possibly, don't know, could be, of the Roman Empire for his death later on, of his crucifixion. We don't know, but again, he's being led where he does not want to go. Could be another idiom for being led to his death or his crucifixion. But noticing here that Jesus is describing the outcome to Peter for following me. And he said that before. He said that a while back. He said it clear in the Sermon on the Mount. Those who follow me are going to be persecuted. Those who follow me, you're going to face death. So again, you think about, well, why was Peter told this? Now, it seems like a depressing ending to end the Gospel of John. But why tell Peter that he's not going to live out his life peaceably and with freedom? Well, rather, Peter is going to be executed. Well, again, why is John saying this? Why is John the Beloved saying these things? Well, again, this is said to show what kind of death he was going to glorify God. And noticing here that Peter was not told what kind of death he was going to suffer, but the words are not that he was told what kind of death he would experience, but rather noticing that he was told by what kind of death he was to glorify God. So again, this reminds us an important theme that we see again and again in John's gospel. In John chapter 9, we're introduced to a blind man from birth. Now, the disciples, asked Jesus if this man sinned or if his parents sinned, so that he was born blind. Now, if you remember, Jesus gave the answer, John 9:3. It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be what? Glorified or displayed in him, is another translation. Now, a little later, we read about Lazarus, who's sick, and his sickness is going to kill him. But Jesus, he does not respond by going to Lazarus immediately. Rather, he stays for about 2 days longer wherever he's at. Now, the reason that he says it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. John chapter 11, verse 4. So, Noticing here, we think about this. We think about, again, there are going to be things that Peter's going to go through and the rest of the apostles. And ultimately, they're going to be facing persecution. They're ultimately going to be facing death. All these things is going to be for the glorified, or to glorify the Father. You know, you think about, even for us today, you think about our life, think about maybe someone's sickness they're going through, maybe someone's suffering, or maybe someone, death or whatever it is to be the praise of God's glory. God is to be glorified in everything, we do in this life. He's not set aside for activities. God is not a sideline for, our work or family or anything else. Our activities must be God's glory. That's where our priorities, that's where they should be laid. Remember that Peter was told this because he needed to be ready to glorify God to the death. That we need to glorify God in our lives, that we have to be ready to glorify him, even in death. Now, of course, today, thankfully, we don't face those kind of things where, deny God and live, kind of thing. Of course, other countries, it's dangerous over in China. I think many of you know that, that's the Bible and all that. They don't like that kind of stuff there, that propaganda. So, and, they're always in danger, and they always have to do things on the down low, worshiping, things such as that. And they have to be careful not to gather together with a lot of people. They kind of have to, again, everything has to be on the down low. Mm-hmm.
Is trying to, he's been doing it 10 years, he's rewriting the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
He's already finished John, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
And it was on one of my emails.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those specific verses that they think it was just Sunday school.
Wow.
Now, where is he getting the authority?
Yeah. And you can already tell what he's trying to do, because China's all about propaganda and all that stuff. So once he's done, he's going to spread it out to everyone there. And like, this, you want the Bible so much? There you go. I did my translation. There you go. And so.
His own version of the Bible that the Nazis go into church and say, you can do this passage, you can't do this passage.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's crazy. I did not know about that. Thank you for bringing that up, Ray. So again, we see these things that, again, we're supposed to glorify, our God. We're supposed to, that's where our priorities are supposed to be set. Again, Peter was told this, feed his sheep. He was told these things that he is to be ready to glorify God. And again, that's the same for our lives. Every moment in our life, we need to make sure that we're doing that. And we have to be ready to express that faith, such as what we see of Paul, of Peter, and the rest of the apostles, of what they did in their life. And God forbid I see it, or my kids see it, or anyone else's, that in this country it'll get to a point so bad that you're gonna have to pack up and leave, leave the country, kind of thing, where it gets so bad that you just can't get together no more. You can't worship God no more. You can't do none of those things. I mean, you think about it, it's scary. But you think about it, if that happened the next day, what would you do? You either have two choices. You can either just keep continuing worshiping, even though you're going to go to jail or be put to death, or you just have to leave the country. Huh? Well, I know. I mean, eventually, Huh? I think we'll go to Mexico, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'll try to let's go somewhere. I don't know. But anyway, but yeah, those are just thoughts, because sometimes we get so, because of course, our lives are so busy, right? Excuse me. And we don't think about those things, but that's a possibility. Again, I hope it never happens, but that's a possibility. And what will we do? You know, it's scary. But, and we forget too that our brothers and sisters around the world are faced with that daily. And we're so privileged. We're so blessed that we do get to come here and do this without no worry. So,
What's really frightening though, when some of your relatives
mhm,
came up in the church
mhm.
and now they don't believe it. It's really sad.
Yeah, that's sad as well. Mhm. And it's discouraging. Yeah. Yeah. A verse to bring up in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 6 through 8. 2 Timothy 4, 6 through 8. Paul here, again, talking to Timothy, trying to encourage him. For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Finally, there's laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day. Not to me only, but also to all who have loved his appearing. And you think about that, it's an amazing thing because, again, Paul knows that, his life is coming to an end. How can Paul express his faith? How can he be ready at the time of his death? Well, again, he gives that answer for the crown of righteousness awaiting him, that it's going to be awarded to him. That's something that, will give, that gives him the assurance, gives him that courage, that reward that is waiting, ever in your life. All right, we'll stop here, and I don't have much left. We'll probably get into something else maybe, but appreciate you guys. Thank you for your time.